guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Rebecca and I am a stay-at-home mom and an online reseller. And today is going to be a mom life kind of video. It's actually going to be a birth story. So a little while ago, I told the story, my birth story for my first child, which was my son. And I am currently almost 17 weeks pregnant with our third child. So before the third child's born, I wanted to do my birth story for my second child because it was very different from my first. It was more of one of those like healing births that they talk about. The first one was a little more traumatic. You can go check that video out. I'll put it up here in the cards. But my second one was much better. If you like this video at any point, please give it a like and subscribe to come back for more mom life and reselling lifestyle videos. I do a little bit of both here on my channel. And follow me over on Instagram. I am at TheCozyShire. And without further ado, we're going to get into this birth story. So if you see any minor shaking of the camera or any fuzzy tails pop up, my cat is here with me. I don't know what she's doing. Hopefully she'll just lay down and chill for the video. So let's start with a little bit of backstory for the pregnancy leading up to the birth. So I got pregnant in May of 2020. It was like April, May, somewhere in there. In May is when I found out that I was pregnant. And of course, everything from 2020 was going on with the pandemic. But we kind of weren't sure what was going to happen with that. So we just went ahead and decided to try to have our second child anyway at that point. My pregnancy was pretty uneventful, medically speaking. I did have to do like the 3-hour glucose test, which was dumb. I say it was dumb because I failed the first one by like less than 5 points. So I went ahead and did a 3-hour one, and then I was like very hypoglycemic at the end. I think my blood sugar was 40. They literally called me hours later and were like, hey, we're just checking in on you because your blood pressure or your blood sugar was so low. And I'm like, well, yeah, because I really didn't need that test. But I was fine. Everything was fine. In hindsight, I just wouldn't do that. I would use my own judgment better. I'm not at any risk for gestational diabetes, and I was so close to that threshold. But yeah, other than that, there really weren't any issues that I recall. I didn't have any, I had all my regular like pregnancy symptoms. I didn't have any major medical scares. Nothing wrong with me, nothing wrong with her. Everything was pretty much fine. The biggest issue that was just ongoing was the fact that we were in the middle of a pandemic. So it was a very stressful pregnancy. My first pregnancy, I was actually living in a different state from my family. Like it was me and my husband. We were just one state over, so it was a couple hours away. It wasn't like states or across the country away. But you know, we still didn't have our family like right there. So that was hard. And then the second one, we were like, oh, great. Now we're like back home. We're like 20 minutes from our family. And then the pandemic happened, and we were like, now like, it's like I couldn't spend my pregnancy really with the family that much. During the summer, we did spend more time with them. It seemed like the rates for the pandemic were a little bit lower, and we just felt more comfortable at that point. But as we got into the fall, people were getting more sick. You know, people are staying indoors more. And just everything that was happening, we ultimately ended up deciding, I can't remember exactly when, I think it was like shortly before Thanksgiving, that we were basically going to cut physical contact with our families and pretty much with everybody, except for the people in our own home, which was just me, my husband, and my son. My husband was still working, and he was now working from home. I had no reason to leave because I was already a stay-at-home mom. So we literally just stayed home like all the time. He was the only person to like leave the house to go get groceries. And it was kind of scary because there was just a lot of unknowns. We didn't know if I did get COVID, what would happen. We didn't know like what the risks were going to be. There really wasn't a whole lot of information at that point. So it was just very stressful, constantly being like, how much of a risk do you take with the life of myself and my unborn child versus being with our family, which is also a really big deal to us. It was stressful all around as far as that goes. We were very lucky. We never ended up catching COVID. I still think that nobody in my house has had COVID. We've all been like vaccinated and stuff, but there's no real way to know. You know, nowadays it's like if you get sick, we don't always take COVID tests, but none of us have gotten so severely sick that we had to like go and get tested at a doctor's or anything like that. We've done a few home tests here and there, mostly on our son who kept getting sick from preschool. But you know, that was like after 2020. So getting a little bit off track, but so yeah, we did like Thanksgiving. I think maybe we did see family for Thanksgiving. I can't remember. I don't take notes on any of my videos in case you're not aware. Everything is just off my memory, off the cuff. So I can't exactly remember what we did about Thanksgiving. I know Christmas was just our family at our house, like the three of us. I want to say maybe we like ordered like a catered meal or something, like, because we weren't really gonna like make a whole bunch of homemade food when it was just the three of us. And people would drop, you know, they drop presents off on our porch and we exchanged presents kind of that way. There was a lot of FaceTime calls, things like that. But we weren't getting together with people just because we were concerned and we just didn't really want to risk anything. So getting up to when I was actually due, I was due on March 8th of 2021. So it did actually cross over the new year. I remember leading up to it. I feel like towards the end of pregnancy, you're always like, you get to like 37 weeks or something, and you're just so big and uncomfortable, and you're like, there's no way I'm making it to my due date. This baby's got to come out earlier. There's no chance. Many times that is not the case, right? Babies get to decide when they want to be born, usually. So the fun part about this pregnancy, aside from all like the bad stuff that was going on with the pandemic, is that I have a very large extended family. My mom is one of 12. And so I have tons of cousins on that side, and all on that side of the family, there were 4 of us who were pregnant at the same time. It was me and 2 of my cousins. And then because I have cousins that are much older than me, they're like my parents' age because she has so many siblings. It was my cousin's daughter was also pregnant. So 2 of us, me and one of my other cousins, we were due with our second babies. And then 2 of them were due with their first children. So it was kind of fun because we were all due right in that February, March time frame. And it was like, wonder who's going to be born first. And, you know, some of them, I think one didn't know what the gender was going to be, and the rest of us knew the genders. So it was like, I knew I was due with a girl. Well, 3 of us were due with a girl, and then we had one who didn't know, and she ended up having a boy. But so it was kind of fun, just to kind of, you know, you could text a little bit back and forth and be like, you know, how are you feeling? Well, how are you feeling? Because we were like all due around the same time. So that was kind of fun. But I remember getting close to my due date, and you know, there was even a girl I had gone to high school with, and I saw on Facebook like a couple days before my due date, her baby was born, and she was due after me. And you get to that like, hey, you're not supposed to cut in line. It's like, wait a second, I want to have my baby. Like, I want to get this baby out. How are you already having your baby? So it's always just kind of funny. You're just trying to just figure out like, when is your baby going to be due? So different from my first pregnancy, I did have quite a number of Braxton Hicks leading up, especially in the last week leading up to my baby's birth. And there were several times where I was like, ooh, this might be the start of labor. And then it just never happened. So that was fine. But it definitely had me more on edge. You know, you think the second time around you're going to, like, I'll know when I'm in labor. And that was not the case, because I really thought I was going to labor a few times, and it never progressed. Luckily, it didn't get so far that like I actually went to the hospital and got turned back or something like that. But yeah, I was definitely like right there. So like I said, I was due on March 8th. I had a doctor's appointment on March 9th. And going into this appointment, it was like an early afternoon appointment, I think, or maybe around 2 p.m., something like that. And going in, sitting there discussing things with the OB is the same practice I'm going to this time. So it's an OB midwife mix. At that time, the midwives were doing all the deliveries in the hospitals, and the OBs were doing everything else at the office unless they were needed at the hospital. But yeah, I was just I had an OB appointment. It was with an OB, and she was talking to me about all these different things and when to come to the hospital, making sure I remember everything, because I was already at my due date. You know, I was a day after, and I was like, I was worried that I would have to get induced. But as I was sitting there at my appointment, I was like, I was telling her, I was like, I think I might like be in labor now, like early labor, because I'd been having contractions like on and off all morning, but they weren't, I don't want to say on and off. I was having contractions all morning. They just weren't like super severe. But they were continuous, whereas my Braxton Hicks would last for, I don't know, maybe an hour or something, or, you know, whatever. And then they'd go away. But this was like several hours, and I was like, I think I might be in labor. But like early labor. And the annoying part is they still, I know it's probably just their protocol, whatever, but I still had to go to the office there and schedule my induction for like a week out. I think they do it on like 41 weeks. I had to sit there, fill out all the paperwork, discuss all the things with like she was some sort of secretary who was like filling out all the information, then she sent it to the hospital. And I was just like, I told her, I was like, I'm having contractions, like sitting here talking to you guys. And like, I don't think this is like necessary, but we had to do it anyway. It's kind of annoying. But everything was looking good. And once again, like I said, I don't write these things down. So I can't recall if I was like dilated or effaced or anything like that at that appointment. I did not do any kind of like, I was not interested in doing any kind of membrane sweeps or even like being checked. I feel like maybe she did check me just to see if I was dilated, but I can't quite remember. So anyway, after my appointment and everything, I went home, and throughout the night I kept feeling more contractions, and they weren't too severe yet, but I think we were nearing my son's bedtime. And even though we were separating from our family, we were going to need to be with our family to for us to go to the hospital so they could take care of our son. We packed up his bag and everything, called my parents, and we basically did a handoff at the door, and he went with them because I was like, it's basically his bedtime. If I don't have the baby, at least he's somewhere where he can sleep overnight and he's fine. But we didn't really want to like have to wake him up, or, you know, we weren't planning on them coming into our house. It was just us sending him to their house. And that's basically what we did. We sent him over there. So after he had left, I'm pretty sure my husband like laid down for a while because he was like, oh, this is what he did the first time too. He's like, in case we're going to the hospital, I'm going to go rest. So that's what he did. And I'm pretty sure I was just kind of like laboring and packing my bag. My first labor, I was like, I'm going to go get a shower and stuff. This time I was like, I just don't feel like it. I was tired already. I didn't want to like jump in the shower or whatever. So I was just laboring at home, you know, getting my hospital bag packed and everything. And it was late, very late evening, maybe around 11 or something, that we decided, I had called the OB line or whatever and discussed with them what was going on. And they said, yeah, go ahead and come on in. So prior to this, I really wanted to stay at home in labor as long as possible, because when I went in with it was my first baby, but I wasn't super dilated, and they had me walk around the hospital and stuff, and it was kind of a pain. So this time I really wanted to stay at home as long as possible, but they had told me, this is your second, just like, don't wait too long, basically. So we live about 25 minutes from the hospital. We got all of our stuff packed. I waited until I felt like I was really starting to breathe through the contractions more, and I was like, okay, I think we should go. So we get in the hospital. We get into the car, drive to the hospital. It's really late at night, so pretty much no traffic. We live out in the country. Anyway, there's really no traffic. We get there, we get checked in. This is a very different hospital than the first one. This is a smaller hospital. They don't even have like, I don't think they really have a NICU. If they do, it's like a very low level NICU, so you'd have to send out if there's something wrong with your baby. But it's a very nice, smaller, quaint hospital. So we get checked in, go into triage and everything. They check me, and I'm 3 centimeters dilated. And I'm like, oh, yay, because I was only like 1 centimeter the first time I went in with my first baby. So I was happy to already be at a 3. I was like, this is great. And my plan going into this was that I wanted to have an unmedicated birth, which is exactly what I wanted with my first, but it didn't work out. So this time around, same thing. I want unmedicated birth, and I requested to not have an IV placed because I just felt like that was gonna like make me feel more medicated, even though there's not any kind of medication in it. Just it felt like it was like that one step closer to being able to get medicated, and I really wanted to separate myself from that option as much as possible, unless it was like necessary. So we get checked in. They decide, yeah, you're in labor, let's get you to a room. So I walked to the delivery room, and I was the only one there to deliver. Like, that's how small this hospital is. It's got like a handful of rooms. It's very, like I said, it's a very nice hospital. It's not like a janky, tiny, like doesn't have resources hospital. It's a very nice hospital. It's just, we're in a small community here, which is really great. So it was nice because I was the only one they had to keep checking on. And prior to having gone to labor and all this stuff, I had discussed with my midwife, like I told her, I was like, I want to do it unmedicated, but I don't know like if I can. I don't know the best way to prepare for this or whatever. And I'm going to go into this in a different video about like, I guess, how to prepare for an unmedicated birth, or natural birth. People get offended when you say natural, so we'll say unmedicated, for an unmedicated birth. And yeah, I'll go into that in a different video. But basically, I had already discussed things with my midwife prior. I was hoping she was going to be the midwife that was going to be on call that day because she had helped me so much. And one of the things that she had told me was not to necessarily make a birth plan, since it was my second time through, but to write a birth letter, more so like describing to the nurses, like, here's what happened in my last birth, and here's how I feel like I can best be supported in this birth. So it was more like, you know, I want them to come in and help. If I feel like I need help, or if I feel like my husband needs help coming up with ideas of ways to help me cope and things like that. But they did a very good job during my labor of just being pretty like hands off. I did request, like, I didn't want cervical checks, so they checked me once when I got there, and they ended up checking me once later. But and they did ask me if I wanted to be checked, but in between they didn't check me. They did have me like lay down every now and then to put a monitor on, which this time around I'm definitely going to ask if I can like stay up for that instead of having to lay down for it. But I think they want you more still, so that's why. And I was like, okay, it's only for a few minutes, whatever. But anyway, we kept laboring. Right when we got to the delivery room, it wasn't that bad. I was still like coping very well. I think we put something on the TV. I don't even know what it was. Wasn't really paying attention, but just had something going on. And then for the most part, the way that I just labored was standing up, kind of rocking my hips back and forth. And there's like a pressure point right here in this webbing. And my husband would just like get his thumb in there and like firmly massage it during every single contraction. That was what I needed. Like, if he wasn't doing that, I was like dying, which was like if he had to run to the bathroom or something. But that was really all I needed. I didn't have back labor. I didn't need anyone pushing on my hips or anything like that. It wasn't bothering me. I was just making my way through it. That was all going really well. And then they came in at one point to check me. And laying in the bed was just so hard because laying still was the hardest thing for me. It made my contractions really hurt. It made them really painful to not be able to stand and then kind of move back and forth. So that was really hard. And I remember one of the things I had brought with me for like comfort is like a fuzzy baby lovey. It was like an elephant and a little lovey on it. And this is when I like reverted to like being a child. I asked my husband to get it out of my bag, and I just kind of like put it up against my face and was like rubbing it, and I was crying because I was just like, I was so tired. I was so beat. And getting back out of the bed is really hard when you're in the middle of contractions, because every time I would move, I'd have a contraction. And so it was really hard to get back up. But yeah, everything seemed okay. They checked me and they're like, how far do you think you are? And I'm like, I'm going to be pessimistic on this and say I'm 4 centimeters. This was hours in. You know, this was like, we're probably at like 6:30 a.m. now. So probably been laboring at the hospital for around 6.5 hours. And I was like, I'm just going to assume I'm like 4 centimeters. I've only moved to 7. They're like, you think you only want a centimeter? And I'm like, I just don't want to say, oh, I think I'm like 9 centimeters, you know? So yeah, that's what I said. And they're like, well, you're like 7, almost 8 centimeters. And I was like, oh, okay, great. So during this time also, I had one period where I was like feeling very sick, and I was like, I just feel like I need to eat something. And luckily the nurses were in there, and she was very sweet. She's like, well, do you want me to bring you some crackers? And I was like, you can do that? Like, I can eat something? Like, they had told me you can have, you know, like Gatorades and water, juice. You can have like lollipops, things like that. But I didn't think they'd actually give me like crackers. So she brought me some, and that was amazing. Like, I'm going to be packing some of those this time, just in case someone tells me they don't want me to have them, because those settled my stomach so much. I didn't feel sick anymore. I didn't have to feel like I was going to throw up or anything like that. And throughout this whole time, I'm just drinking water, having to go to the bathroom constantly every 30 minutes to an hour, just making sure I'm keeping like my bladder as empty as possible, because those can make contractions worse if you don't go. And so when they checked me and I was like a 7, they had also come back with my blood test results. So they had taken some blood and also given me a COVID test when we had first gotten there. And my husband, we were both negative for a COVID test, or for COVID. And I didn't have to wear a mask while I was laboring. They were very kind with that. My husband, I think, wore a mask just when they came in the room. But since we tested negative, we didn't really need to. But when they had taken my blood and checked it, they determined that I did have a low blood count. A low, what do you call it? CBC? My CBC was low. Whatever. Basically, they wanted me to have an IV in so I could be given medication once I delivered. So I was at that 7 centimeters. They're like, okay, you know, this is what we'd really like to do. And I was like, okay, that's fine. They're like, all right. And they could see I was starting to struggle with the contractions. And they're like, have you gotten in the shower yet? Why don't you try getting in the shower? And we're going to go get your IV ready. And then, like, they weren't going to give me, like, actual IV fluids, just a saline lock. So they're like, let's go do that. And, you know, we'll be back in a few minutes. And then we'll get your IV set up. I was like, okay. So shift change at this hospital was at 7 a.m. So the midwife I had had the whole time was very kind. She wasn't the one I was talking to before, but she was still very nice. All the midwives were very nice. And they listened to me with what I wanted to do and everything. So that's what we decided to do. I was like, okay, I need to go to the bathroom first. So I went to the bathroom, and then I got up to get in the shower. And my husband was trying to get like the temperature good in the shower or whatever. And I got in, and I started having a contraction, and it was very strong. And I was like in the middle of this. I'm like, after this contraction's over, I'm going to tell my husband I think he should go get a nurse, because I feel like I'm going to have to push soon. Like, I feel like I'm very close. So in the middle of this contraction, while I'm in the shower, my water breaks. I'd been in the water in the shower for like a minute, maybe. My water breaks. It hadn't broken yet. And immediately I was like, I'm pushing and I can't stop. Like, I immediately felt like this baby is coming out. I'm about to birth this baby in the shower. So I told my husband. He grabs the nurse's cord that's in the bathroom. He pulls the cord, and they come rushing in, and they were like, I was just like, I'm pushing. I can't stop. I'm pushing. And they are like, okay, well, let's try to get you over to the bed. So somehow, I don't know how, but somehow my contractions and like the whole pushing sensation, it like stopped while I was in transit from the bathroom to the bed. I don't know how that happened, but I got to the bed, and I asked them, I said, you know, I wanted to push on all fours. That was my plan. So I was like, can I push on all fours? And they're like, yeah, you can push in whatever position you want. So I said, okay. So I climbed up on the bed, kind of leaning over the back of the bed. Immediately, that like I need to push sensation came back. So I started pushing. Now remember, they were supposed to come give me an IV. That never happened. So I started pushing, and it was very painful. I can't tell you if there was like a ring of fire or whatever. It all just hurt, right? But I remember just like, I felt like I was trying to climb up out of the bed. Like, I was just grabbing it, and it felt like much better than pushing on your back, in my opinion. It felt much more natural. But that was kind of what was going on. So I only had to push for like 10 minutes, I think, maybe a little bit less, until my baby was born. And she was born, I'm going to sound like a terrible mother. I don't remember exactly the time. I know I have it in records and stuff in her room, but I can't go in there right now. But it was shortly after 7 a.m. I want to say it was 7:22 a.m., but don't quote me. So she comes out. She's not the best color immediately, and she's kind of like below me because I was still on all fours. And they are like trying to rub her and everything. My husband said he was kind of freaking out because she didn't look good, but they just had to rub her and get her stimulated, and then she was okay. And then, if they helped me flip over basically so I could lay down in the bed or sit down in the bed and hold her, and she was okay and everything. And then it was funny, later on, I had been reading about when I was in recovery, I was reading the report on my phone in my patient portal. And it said that they did the somersault maneuver. So later on, I asked my midwife, I said, what the heck is a somersault maneuver? And they're like, oh, well, when she came out, she had the cord wrapped around her neck 4 times, which she said is the most she's seen. So literally, when she came out, they had to flip her multiple times, like a somersault, to unwrap the cord. And they said it was a short cord, but she was completely fine. They didn't notice like any issues from it. My husband got to cut the cord, which he said was actually like really thin compared to when he had cut our son's cord, and it was like hard to cut through. He's like, this one was really skinny and thin, so it was really easy. But she was fine. But the problem was I was now hemorrhaging, not severely, but I was hemorrhaging. I didn't have an IV line in, so now they were having trouble getting an IV, getting a line on my arm. So they were trying for a while. All the while, she's on my chest. I'm getting to just hold her and everything, but they're trying to stick me and they just can't get it. It's taking forever. They do eventually get it, but it took quite a long time. And I forget exactly how much blood I ended up losing. It wasn't enough that I needed like a transfusion or anything, but they did have to give me a shot of Pitocin in my leg to help stop the bleeding. My midwife was amazing this entire time. And the kind of lucky part is the midwife that I wanted to be there for my delivery came on shift at 7. So she's like, I barely got on shift before you guys pulled that cord and we ran into the room. So it was very close, but she did end up delivering my baby. And then I needed, I don't know what tears or whatever I had, but I needed stitches. And that was worse than delivery for me because they have to numb you. Because remember, I didn't have an epidural. They had to numb me with like a lidocaine shot in the bits that just delivered a baby. So that didn't feel good. I had a lot of like that moment of like grab onto a nurse's arm and I'm like, I'm so sorry. They're like, okay, try to like relax. I'm like, you're putting a needle in my lady bits where I just had a baby. So like, I can't relax really. So obviously once that medicine's in, it's okay. But just getting that was horrible. I think I'd rather birth a baby than get a needle put in down there. So that was not fun. But yeah, a completely different birth experience aside from that lidocaine shot at the end. Everything worked out great. I was able to just like, after I'd recovered a little bit, I was able to get up. I was able to just go use the bathroom like normal. I was able to walk the bassinet to the recovery room. And this was the whole reason, one of the main reasons I wanted to have an unmedicated birth is because I had a horrible recovery with my first. Like the birth wasn't great either. I needed an episiotomy with that one. If you go watch that birth story, you'll see all about that. But the recovery was so much better this time around. So she was born, like I said, I think like 7:22. Her name is Isla. She weighed 7 pounds, 9.5 ounces, and she was 21 inches long. So she was healthy despite the cord being wrapped around. They actually said that the reason my water may have taken so long to break is that it was almost like my body's natural response to keep her safe, because with the cord wrapped around, though she was still in the amniotic fluid, it didn't really matter. It wasn't tight enough that it was injuring her. But they said if my water had broken early on and the cord had been wrapped like that, she might have had trouble coming down. And we might have had to get like a C-section or something. So I'm glad that didn't happen. I'm glad things happened the way they did. And I think that's also one of the reasons I was able to tolerate labor better, was because I had that cushion of my waters having not broken yet. So that's my theory. But I didn't need to do anything crazy to like make it through all those contractions. It was just that pressure point. That was the only thing I needed the entire time. And I couldn't do it to myself so much. I needed someone else to do it. So that's pretty much that birth story. Much better birth story than my first, in my opinion, for how I felt. Postpartum is a whole other story with both of those. I don't really discuss the postpartum much with everything in the birth stories. I feel like it's a long enough story. So if you're interested in how my postpartums have gone, let me know in the comments and I can make a different video discussing that, because once again, different experiences. But yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this birth story. And if you did, like I said, please give this video a like and subscribe. And I hope to see you guys in the next one.